Okay, I want to welcome everybody today to the Power of Our Story, Coffee and Conversation. It's always so great to see you all, and I just want to give a special welcome to Maree Torrey. Maree Torrey is a success coach. She's dubbed LA's most successful coach, one of them, and she is also the host of Legacy in the Making Show podcast. So I'm really excited about what she's bringing today because it's really about addressing the issue of veterans and first responders with the stress of their job. How do you learn to calm down? How do you learn to not ruminate on things that have happened? The post-traumatic stress, the hardship of being able to sleep at night. I mean, these are the things that we hear, the anxiety that can come with transition. So today her title is Your Past Does Not Dictate Your Future. And she's going to share with us some simple steps to heal our nervous system, improve sleep, and move forward with calm and confidence. So Maree, thank you so much for coming on today. It's great to have you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself before we get started?
You bet. So just a short correction. It's Tony Maree, and don't worry, Sarah, a lot of people make that mistake. Torrey's the last name.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I say?
Okay. You're not the first, and you probably won't be the last. But just so people know, it's Tony Maree, and I have been dubbed LA's foremost success coach, and even though I am located in Los Angeles, I do work with people around the country and around the globe, and I've been a coach for 18 years now. Initially, I had my foot in the corporate world and the coaching world all at the same time, but eventually was able to make the transition into doing this full time, which is awesome because it's what I love. And I've been training and certifying all those 18 years. So I have a zillion different tools and certifications because I noticed when I initially started coaching, people would come to their sessions and we'd set up their vision and their business plans and define action steps. And then what would happen is week after week, people would come back to sessions and not have executed on what it is they said they wanted to do. And so that was really when I started my inquiry into how do we shift this. And one of the pieces of the puzzle for me goes back to the roots of my family with my father, who was a colonel in the Australian Army. And one of the ways in which he processed his angst and challenges around his military service is that he became a bit of an amateur magician, and he used to hypnotize me to entertain party guests. And what he would do is he would set up three dining room chairs, one at the tip of my head, one at the end of my heels, and one in the middle. And then he would hypnotize me into a state that they call catalepsy, which means that you imagine that you are stiff as a board. And then he pulls the middle chair out and I'm suspended between those two things. And I realized, I guess I knew from back then the power of our subconscious mind, because that literally is kind of physically impossible to do, but somehow the brain overrides everything. And so then that really started my inquiry into how is it that we get out of our own way? How do we shift our past traumas so we can move forward with power and bring our gifts and our talents to the world in the most meaningful way we can? And a lot of it started with me. My family upbringing was not the smoothest and easiest. My dad was a wonderful man, but he also had a lot of challenges and issues that impacted my upbringing, including, you'll notice that I spelled Tony with a Y. He used to tell me that he always wanted a boy. And I think that's something that I did unconsciously was shorten my name to the masculine version of my name, which is now why I've pulled the Maree in, which is my middle name, to to embrace being feminine. But it was an interesting thing to kind of go through that experience, feeling like there was something intrinsically wrong with you. And I know that that's something that especially people who have been through intense experiences like those in the services, sometimes that's a challenge and a belief that we deal with. We feel that we're broken and that there's something wrong. And I'm here to tell you that that's not the case, that you may have some things in your history that are impacting your present, but we can shift so many of those things. And I want to share with you some easy tools today to do that.
Why don't you share some of your experiences with veterans and military? Just, you know, taking everything that you shared, all your life experience, growing up in a family where your father served in the Australian Army. Maybe you could share a little bit about that, and then just maybe some experiences that you've had helping with some of these techniques, our veterans and first responders.
Yeah, you bet. And actually, I think what I'd love to do, just in the interest of time, is share with you guys a specific story of an encounter, a chance encounter that I had with a Marine. And I was doing, this is a few years ago now, I was doing a training in Philadelphia and was on my way back home after that training. And I'm blessed by being pretty guided. And one of the ways in which I'm guided is that things and people light up to me. So they just look a little brighter than other people. And so I was getting on the plane. It was a Southwest flight. And as you guys probably know, on Southwest, you kind of get to pick your own seat. Like, they don't pre-allocate seats. And I oftentimes get on a plane with the intention of serving my fellow passengers. And so I was walking down the aisle. There were plenty of window and aisle seats, which are my favorites. But the person that lit up to me was this big Marine who was sitting in a window seat. The aisle seat was also taken, so there was only a middle seat. And I looked at that, and I have to admit, I looked at him lit up, and I have to admit, I thought, shit, now I'm going to have to, like, squeeze in here into this middle seat between these two other people for a long flight. But I followed my guidance, and I sat down. And when I sat down, he had his tray table out, and he was sitting there with his elbows on the tray table with his head in his hands. And when I sat down, he did kind of, look up to acknowledge me. And we ended up having a conversation. And it turned out that he was a US Marine. He had been to Philadelphia with his platoon, and they had gone on some R&R at they went to, there's a market in Philadelphia, and I apologize, I don't remember the name of the market right now, but it's a food market. It's a very, very busy place. And there are people from a lot of different cultures in that market. And his experience was that many of the people in the market were wearing burqas, and that triggered his PTSD, having been on 2 tours to Afghanistan. And he found himself in front of his entire platoon of men outside the market, on the sidewalk, gripping a power pole, having a massive panic attack with all his troops watching him. And so he was not a very happy camper when I met him on the plane, and we talked a little bit, and he told me, he'd been through 2 tours. He'd been suffering severely from PTSD. He hadn't slept more than 2 hours a night in years. He'd been to every specialist that the military could provide him. He'd taken medication, and just nothing, nothing was helping. He was a wreck. And so I took him through the process that I'm going to take you guys through today. And it's called Emotional Freedom Technique. You can Google it. It's a technique that relies upon a process called tapping, where you essentially stimulate your acupuncture meridians, And what they know now, which they didn't know, it was interesting because this is a technique that was developed, I think, intuitively initially. And back in the day when it was first developed, they knew it worked, but they didn't know why it worked. And now that they've started being able to do things like put people under fMRIs and things like that, what they do know is that it calms the amygdala, which is your fight and flight mechanism in your brain. And it also diminishes other reactive parts of the brain and helps you get into a more calm state. So it was once kind of classified as woo-woo, but it is no longer, because they're starting to find the evidence of why it is that this works. So there had been a lot of anecdotal successes, but now they're actually starting to understand that it does affect our physiology and our neurology. And so I took him through this process. We just did 10 minutes of just dealing with some stress associated with his tours and with his inability to sleep. And then we stopped at a point where it felt appropriate to stop. I had asked him, and I'm going to ask you guys too, to rank your level of stress around the issue that we decide to address. When I asked him on a scale of 1 to 10 what his level of stress was associated with it, he said, oh, it's 100. Like 10 was not enough, was not adequate for him to express how big of a deal it was for him. And so we got it to the point where he went down to a rank of 4. And then I kind of went back to my thing, and he promptly fell asleep and slept for the rest of the journey, which was much longer than 2 hours. I think it was about 6 hours. And so, we landed, and he woke up, came to himself, and he said, wow, I feel more calm now than I have in years. And I'm like, yeah, and you just had your longest sleep in years too. So that just really drove home to me, just this very chance encounter, how much so many people in service suffer. Not just my dad, you know what I mean? It's like a lot of my experience was my personal family experience. And I used to work with my dad before he passed away. He was actually very open to the work I was doing, and he was constantly seeking how to resolve his own challenges, which is probably part of the reason why I do what I do and why I'm constantly seeking ways to help people shift things quickly.
What a fantastic story. That's really exciting. Just to know that it can have that quick of an impact. Well, I think just for time's sake, why don't we just go ahead with the process? Or just, you can show us, we want to volunteer, right, Tony Maree? Should we ask for a volunteer?
Yeah, I think that would be great. Just one last thing I'm just remembering about this story though, is that I said to him after the fact, you can use this even if you're walking down the street or whatever. I know I do, because people don't really pay attention anyway. And he's like, well, doesn't that look kind of silly? And I'm like, is it any more silly looking than holding onto a power pole in Philadelphia? He's like, oh, you've got a point. So just know that this is still far better. First rule of the Marine Corps is never volunteer. However, I will, Johnny Walker. Bless your heart. Thank you. I appreciate your willingness.
That's great. Should we just, before we move on, does anybody have a question they'd really like to ask right now before we move on to this part, the training part?
Actually, if you don't mind, I'll try to keep it brief. I do have a question.
Yeah, you bet.
I have 6 screws, 2 rods, and 2 gates in my spine, 8 screws, and a rod in my left leg, my left tibia, and 2 rods in my right humerus, amongst other massive injuries. I have gone to acupunctures. These injuries are now 20 years old at this point, almost 20 years old. However, I went to 5, 6, 7 of them, didn't work. My wife, about a year and a half ago, found this guy. She kept on telling me, Johnny, you have to try him. You have to try him. Finally, I'm like, listen, if I go, will you shut up? And she's like, yes, go. And what you said about acupuncture, he is amazing. If you find the right person that knows the right skill set. So I completely believe you. It's not voodoo. And then I have one quick question before you go into the thing, and I don't want to take up too much time because I'm really curious about this. But you were talking about the subconscious, and how the power of the subconscious. I'm not sure how many jarheads are on today, but I know last week there were a lot. And I know every branch of the military can relate to this, but I know jarheads can. In the Marine Corps, they really do teach you subconscious. Like, they push you beyond 110%. The thing is that they teach us to do that for aggression, for success of the mission. Do you have any pointers? So every Marine on here knows how to do that, how to dig in that extra percent that doesn't exist. And we're very familiar with that. But normally we do it for, unfortunately, a lot of times we do it for self-destruction. But do you have pointers on how to recommend to use that for inner peace instead of, mission success or self-destruction or aggression or what we know, to how to use it? I mean, we've been trained very well on how to use it for those things, but not for calmness and peace and tranquility, I guess.
Right. Absolutely. I hear you. And it's a big issue. I've, a couple of the clients that I've worked with, I have one guy who was a Marine and then was an undercover cop for 25 years. Brilliant, brilliant man. Eventually left the service and decided to become a financial advisor. And he realized that so many of the patterns and programs that he had been trained in were not serving him in building relationship and connection with his clients, and it was impacting his success. And so what I can tell you, Johnny, is that there are really three ways that patterns are formed. And it's essentially it's repetition, coming from an authority figure, and intense emotional experiences. And generally speaking, most of our patterns are formed when we're kids and we're in what's known as the theta brainwave state. Children, their minds resonate at the theta brainwave frequency until about age 11. That's what's known as a highly suggestible state. It's similar to the dream state. And so when we're in that very suggestible dream-like state is when we are most open to suggestion, especially if it's repeated and especially if it comes from an authority figure. And so as adults, we can be trained, our subconscious can still be trained, and it can be trained for good, and it can be trained for, obviously the intentions probably necessary in the military, right? And so what you want to do is you want to deconstruct any patterns that aren't working for you in the exact same way that they were created. And so that's one of the reasons why, I mentioned to you, I discovered that one of my sources was hypnosis. So I'm trained as a certified clinical hypnotherapist. And then I'm also trained in another methodology, which is kind of like hypnosis on steroids, that I learned from Britain's top therapist, and that's called rapid transformational therapy. And so those are some great ways to go, okay, let's take a look at what happened in the past. Let's change the meaning of what happened in the past, create a new, more empowering story, and then come up with thoughts that can be suggested to the subconscious that are more empowering and allow for more peace.
Right. So this question is coming from a guy that, if you see behind me, I have hemp rope around a board to train myself. So maybe I need to change my surroundings, I guess, is what you're suggesting.
A pattern interrupt can be a good thing.
Right. So maybe I stop punching that board and find a new way.
Maybe so. Yeah. And you'll find that the technique that we work on today, there's so many ways to like the reason why I continue to keep on training is because the truth is I'm not really a very patient person, and I want to get, you know, the dark side of that has, you know, my daughter could probably tell you that there are some dark sides associated with that, but the light side of that is that it keeps me constantly seeking and searching to find solutions that will help people shift things quickly so they can get on with the business of bringing their brilliance to the world, being successful in business, creating great lives for their families, and leaving a lasting legacy, because I believe that we were all put here for a purpose and that there are important things that each and every one of us has to do.
Great. I'll keep my mouth shut and let you teach us all, because I can't wait. Thank you very much.
Cool. You're welcome. So one of the things that Sara and I talked about yesterday is that we thought that there were 3 possible things that you guys might like to work on. And what we'll do is go through the voting strategy again in the chat. So if you would like, what was it that we talked about, Sara? You took better notes than I did. One was
the sleep, just getting good sleep. If there's any resentments, you had mentioned too that things that have come up is like resentments over obeying an order or like authority. And then the third one option is anxiety that comes from transitioning to civilian life, or the anxiety in, you know, active duty or, you know, law enforcement. But that anxiety and the fear that can come up with the new surroundings. So again, sleep, maybe some resentments or anxiety.
One is sleep. 2 is kind of a sense of resentment or rebellion around authority. And 3 is transition anxiety. So put either 1, 2, or 3 in the chat, and whichever one gets the most votes is the one we'll work with. Sara, you kind of hear we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 ones. Kevin's happy to do any of them. It looks like 1, the sleep issue, is the biggest issue that everyone wants to deal with.
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right, so well, the first thing I'm going to tell you is that, and you know, I have some past trauma in my life, so I have definitely dealt with inability to get to sleep, and then waking up in the middle of the night, bad dreams, trauma-related dreams, all those kinds of things. So while I don't personally have military service experience, I can relate to the challenges that it looks like almost everyone's dealing with here. So definitely the sleep issue is the one that's the winner. So what I can tell you just out the gate is that this method that I teach you, you can use it in the middle of the night. And while we will actually be articulating thoughts around our challenges and concerns today, if you're tired and you're sleepy and all you can do is the tapping and you don't want to be speaking and stuff like that, that's just fine too. And if you don't remember the whole thing, you can just pick a spot and do that. What they've discovered in the fMRI testing is that as much as there's a protocol that we follow, it is to some extent less about the spots or the particular order or anything like that. You can still get impact even if you're just tapping on one spot. And then the other thing I want to reassure you about as we go into this is, you know, Sara has put the links in the chat. I didn't see, Sara, did you put the link to the training document page in there yet?
I did. Yeah, it's up on the top. And you will see it. I apologize. I didn't. There's a note from you that I did not. Yeah, it's
no. So that's interesting. I actually don't see that link there. I see it starts with social media links, and it does have my general websites, but not the link to the specific page. So you don't have to necessarily do it right now, the second, but I would make sure that that gets in there so people can find it. So I've put together an instruction document for you guys. So I want you to just enjoy the experience today and not feel like you have to worry about remembering how to do this, because it's all spelled out in the instructions. We're going to do kind of the the basic technique here today to keep it simple. In the instructions, there's actually a couple of advanced techniques as well that you can leverage, so you can do this for yourself at home. And you know, Johnny, you've got your kids. This actually, it's a very fun thing to do with kids. You can kind of teach it to them depending on what their age group is, as Simon says, for instance. So as I go through this, just maybe think about how it is that you can maybe share it with friends and family too, because the happier and healthier, the more people that we have that are calmer and happier in the world, the better place it's going to be for all of us. So I want you to, you know, share this with people. Don't feel like you have to protect any copyright or anything like that. Just share the resource as much as you want with your friends and family. All right. So one of the things that we talked about doing is getting a volunteer so we can get some of the language, and maybe you all can just kind of offer up, like, what are some of the things that you say to yourself when you're having trouble sleeping? Because what we want to do here is we actually want to, this is not the time to be politically correct. This is the time to bring up the head trash, right? Because that's actually what we're going to take the stress off, is the head trash that comes up when you're struggling to sleep. So you can either unmute yourself and volunteer, because what we're going to try and do is like bring some of these statements up and take the stress off them.
Anybody have some head trash when they're trying to sleep? Please feel free.
I'll bring it up if nobody else wants to. I'll go ahead and volunteer.
Thanks, Johnny.
If I misspeak, you guys can correct me, but last week we actually hit on the topic of why a lot of us don't talk. And we brought up the fact that it's not really, I mean, it is a lot of what we saw or did, but we were trained for that. What really, a lot of us, I can't speak for everybody, I can speak for myself, is shame. And I didn't come to terms with that for a long time. And it's not shame that I gave 110%. It's that if I gave 111%, what would the outcome have been? And also shame that I couldn't do more. I couldn't give more. And shame that there are guys that I think are way more worthy for somebody to say, thank you for your service. Every time somebody says that to me, I cringe. I'm just like, God, no. Don't thank me for my service. There's so many other people. So for me, it took me a while to realize it wasn't the trauma. It was the shame after the trauma that I didn't do or wasn't able to do more for the guy to the left and the right of me, and for my Marine Corps, for the Corps itself. To anybody, if you have different feelings, please, stand me corrected. But for me, that's what it is, the shame.
That's huge. Thank you for your willingness to be vulnerable and share that, Johnny. One of the things Sarah and I were talking about yesterday is that vulnerability is the new courage. So anyone else want to share, like, what sorts of things run through your head when you're trying to get to sleep? I'm going to pick on someone.
Would that be like one?
Okay, Sarah, you go first.
Just real quick, I just really recapping Johnny, is I could have done more.
Mm-hmm.
That seems like that could be a huge message.
Mm-hmm. So I could have done more. Okay, Michael.
It's not even just I couldn't have done more. It's also if I did something different. If I, it's a combination.
Like the if onlys as well.
If onlys, and also not worthy. I know guys that are way more badass, that way more than I did, and they deserve to be here. They deserve to have those 3 kids tearing the house apart, and they don't have it, and I do. That to me that's rough. That's what's on my mind the most.
Yeah, that's huge. Michael Parker, what comes up for you when you're struggling to sleep?
I was going to say what he just said.
Just like, so it sounds like this worthiness issue is a big one. Anyone else want to just raise your hands? Is worthiness a big thing that comes up for you? Yeah, Chris Hoyer says yes. Johnny, Sarah, you already said yes. Travis, is that? Sam says yes. Okay, so it's kind of like I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough. Is that part of it?
I think it. Chris, go ahead, brother. I don't mean to keep interrupting. I
Oh,
see.
no, not at all. Not at all. I think for me, a lot of it is on a similar boat, but I didn't do enough, and I'm not doing enough. You know, in my past with all the stuff I went through, and even though I think I'm making a pretty good impact now with what I've taken on board. I feel like there's so much more I could be doing. I feel guilty sometimes if I want to go ride my motorcycle or if I want to go for a walk, and I should be doing other things. And those, truthfully, they don't really weigh on my mind as far as sleep deprivation for me necessarily, but they invade my space during the day. And I think that's probably pretty similar as well. So
Yeah, well, maybe if we kind of look at this as a slightly broader topic of peace of mind, perhaps. So it's not necessarily always just when you're trying to sleep, but even in your waking hours, these are the thoughts that interrupt your peace of mind. Would that be accurate?
absolutely. Oh, yeah, for sure.
Can I pop in too?
Yeah.
I think, again, it's the same old theme, which I think probably many of us have heard, is that difference between shame and guilt. There's like this shame that seems to come into that space when, you know, for veterans and for first responders, you know, guilt can be helpful because like, oh, okay, you know what, I need to not do that. I need to go over here. But that shame, there's just nothing good about it. It's like these thoughts, I'm not doing enough, I didn't do enough, you know, all these things that come in there that are just, there's nothing helpful or even many times true about it. Is that, would you say that's accurate? It's just this somehow that something came in that is controlling the narrative inside.
Can I hate to jump in real quick and just to back up that up. And I know I'm talking a lot, and I promise after I'll shut my mouth. My father was a Marine, Vietnam vet, combat vet, saw a hell of a lot more than I did a lot more than I did. And so I have had him to kind of reflect upon my own issue. And what we say about shame and guilt, but and I can't speak for the other branches. I'm sure they're similar, but definitely for the Marine Corps, even in Paris Island and MCT, before you even go to MOS school, you do not fail. The failure is not an option. You fail, you get kicked out. You get MSRP'd or whatever. I forget the platoon called, but every morning you wake up and there's 3 guys racks. They're just gone. You never see them again. And it's just really ingrained in what Tony, what you were saying before about authority, repetition and emotional. That is Paris Island, except for take God and hope out of it, and that's Paris Island. And they break you down and they wire you. And it took me years. I fought it. I grew long hair. And you can check on my Facebook. There was a time I had long hair, the beard. I tried to be a hippie. I made a community garden in my front yard. And I even made a newspaper article about it. And one day I just woke up. I'm like, this is not me. And then I wrapped some hemp rope up on a 2x4 and start punching it. I'm like, that's me. You can't really escape it. And so to us, like what you touched on, I'm very interested. But for a Marine, that's really hardwired, and it took me a long time, and I fought that darkness, and I went through a really dark time. And then one day I just woke up. I went and got a high tight and shaved my beard and just accepted the fact that I'm a fucking Marine, and I can't beat that. And what am I going to do? Am I going to let that destroy me? Or am I going to embrace it and move forward? And I've been trying my best, but it's still, I think even those of us jarheads that have embraced it, we still, look, sleep. None of us are fucking sleeping.
Right. Yeah.
None of us.
It is a huge deal. I'm going to pause you there, Johnny. Thank you so much for your sharing.
Yeah.
Just in the interest of time, I do want to get us to jump in. So what I want you to do is, and you can share in the chat, but you don't have to, just rank on a scale of 1 to 10. How upsetting is everything that we've talked about here to you? So 1 being it's not a big deal, and 10 being it's a really big deal. So just take note of that for yourself. Kevin's at a 7, Travis 5, 7. We got a bunch of 7s going on here. We got a 4, we got a 5. I need my glasses. Okay, so for some of you it's pretty up there, and some of you it's a little bit more middling, but it's still an issue. And Sarah, what is it for you?
I would say about I don't know, 3 or 4 now. Hasn't always been that. It's been much higher in the past, but yeah.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
can relate.
Yeah. So the reason why we rank this is so you can get a feel for if things shift for you. And obviously we're just going to do a small, relatively generalized session here today. But oftentimes people, you know, like my Marine on the plane who went from 100 down to 4 in 10 minutes. And then sometimes what happens is it actually kind of percolates. And by the following morning, you'll notice that things are even lower still. And of course, if things don't shift dramatically, then what I would encourage you to do is to persist with this, because it is evidence-based and they do know that it shifts things. They've been doing a lot of work recently with nurses in COVID units, because they're on the front lines dealing with something pretty, an invisible enemy that is pretty frightening and scary as well. And they're getting some really great results in that arena too. So I'm going to show you what it is that we do. There's a specific protocol, and the first thing we do is we start with tapping on what I call the karate chop point. So it's literally the halfway mark between the wrinkle underneath your little knuckle and the wrinkle that shows your wrist, where your wrist is. So it's halfway between there. If you imagine yourself wanting to do an ideal karate chop on something, it's that middle part of your muscle. So we're going to tap on that 3 times, and I'll just kind of walk you through it first so you know what we're doing, and then we'll get started. So you tap on that three times, saying the statement. So if we were going to kind of put this in, like with everything that you've said, I really think that the thing that that came up the most for each of you is this "I'm not worthy" piece. So let's choose that as our core statement. And so there's a specific syntax that we use, and it may be challenging to say all of this to start with. I know when people have struggled, sometimes saying that they love and accept themselves can take some work. But essentially what we do is we'll say something like, even though I don't feel worthy, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. And you do that on the karate chop while tapping, and we say that 3 times. And then what you do is, I'm going to just lean forward more so you can see me. You tap at the very beginning of your eyebrow, and then at the side of your eye, underneath your eye, where the bottom part of the curve of the bag of your eye is, and then under your nose, and then under your lip at the apex of the curve of your chin. And then on the collarbone, if you feel the beginning of your collarbone and you go an inch in and an inch down, there's kind of a divot, like a dip that you'll sort of feel in there. That's the next spot. And don't worry, all of this is in the instructions. And you'll be able to follow me on this one. And then in alignment with your chest, and as if you're kind of divided halfway down, like you've got this seam on a fitted shirt or something like that, that midway point in your body, right in alignment with your nipple. That's the next one. The next one is the top of the head. And sometimes I do the heart as well. And what we do is we want to bring up the negative stuff. So we actually want to say the stuff that is going on for us, the "I'm not worthy" statements, the "I couldn't, I should have done more, I haven't been able to give enough, I'm not doing enough." So what we're going to do is we bring those statements up, and then your nervous system gets to rest and relax in the presence of those thoughts. And then it kind of diminishes the power, excuse me, it diminishes the power those thoughts have on us. So I'm just going to take a sip of water before we jump in, and then let's get going. And sometimes things will come up that you can't even verbalize, right? It's a good time to swear. If you're saying anything nasty to yourself, it is the time to bring it up. So, and it's pretty cool. I actually had a session with a client just the other day where we did this. I gave him permission to swear. He's a very God-fearing man. He's someone who is normally very genteel, but the voices inside his head were pretty unkind. And as we went through it, eventually we just both started laughing, and we continued tapping as we were laughing, and he got, the voices, the stuff that he says to himself came up and out, and we were able to like shift them really significantly. So here we go. Let's get started. Even though I'm not worthy, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. Even though I don't feel worthy, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. And feel free to state this out loud. Obviously, you guys are muted and I'm the one that's doing the talking right now. I do encourage you to unmute yourself if you've got something that you want to add. And if I'm saying words that don't quite fit, just change them for yourself. So the third time, even though I'm not worthy, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. And then we're going to go to the eyebrow, right at the beginning of the eyebrow, and tap there. Oh, this sense of unworthiness that disrupts my sleep and robs me of my peace of mind. And then the side of the eye. Oh, I feel shame. I feel guilt. I feel like I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy. Under the eye, I know there's so much more I could have done and should have done. And then under the nose, I feel guilty. I feel ashamed. On the chin, even though failure is not an option, sometimes I really feel like a failure. And the collarbone, an inch in, inch down. And all of this really impacts my ability to sleep. And under the arm, and I just don't feel worthy. I don't feel worthy. I feel shame. There's so much more I could have done. There are so many others that did more, have done more, and yet I still have things that they don't have. To Johnny's point on the heart, I have so many blessings. I have my 3 kids. I have so much more than so many other vets have, and I just don't feel worthy. And then what I want you to do is take a deep breath in and scrunch up. Scrunch, 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 scrunch. Tighten every muscle in your body as tight as you can get, your toes, your thighs, your butt, everything. And then just let go with an out breath. Maybe shake it off a little bit. All right. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to do a silent round where you can just think your thoughts or say whatever it is that you want to say. You can watch me and follow what I'm doing physically, but I'll just let you think your own thoughts. So we're going to start here. We will start with the even though I'm not worthy and say that out loud. Even though I'm not worthy, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. Even though I'm not worthy, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. Even though I'm not worthy and I don't feel worthy, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. And then just do a round where we're just going to go to each of the points and just allow yourself to think about what it feels like when you're not sleeping well. And under the nose. On the chin. And on the collarbone, an inch in and an inch down. And then under the arm. On the top of your head. And then scrunch up tight. Screw up your face, everything. And then just let it go and shake it out a little bit. All right, so this time what I want you to do is, as much as you can, and it doesn't have to be perfect, just however much you can, notice whatever feelings come up in your body around this. And you may even notice that there's a particular area in your body where you feel tension or discomfort, and just allow yourself to be present to that as we're doing the tapping, and just allow yourself to experience it. And I'm sorry, there's a little bit of noise going on outside. I hope that's not impacting things too much. Okay, so just notice what comes up in your body. Even though I'm not worthy, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. And I know some of you have to bounce, but you'll at least have the link to the instructions. And Sarah, you'll email that out or something too, right? Okay. Even though I'm not worthy, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. Even though I'm not worthy, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. And just at the beginning of the forehead, just notice, if you can, where you're feeling it in your body. I, for instance, am experiencing tightness in my shoulders. So I'm just going to notice that. And then side of the eye. And then under the eye. And then under the nose. And the chin. And remember to breathe, because oftentimes, especially when we've experienced trauma, we don't breathe. And then we've done the collarbone, we're doing under the arm. And the top of the head. And then just scrunch, scrunch, scrunch. Deep breath in, scrunch up tight, and then let it go and shake it off. All right, so we're going to finish up there for now, just in the interest of time. And I definitely encourage you to take the ball and run with this and see how it shifts. I'd be curious to know if anyone's willing to just take a moment and notice, if you think now about this issue of I'm not worthy, and you rank it on a scale of 1 to 10, if you'd be willing to share in the chat, perhaps where you were and where you are now, if anything has shifted. And you know, that was a pretty short round, so we may not have massive shifts, but hopefully there will be some. Maybe you've got a little bit more of a sense of peace and lightness. Van says she's feeling more aware. Oftentimes, yeah, you just kind of get a little bit more sense of your experience of the present moment. So I'm going to ask a couple of people. Johnny, would you be willing to share, where were you at? You were at a 7. Has anything shifted for you around that? Do you want to unmute yourself?
Yeah, I could definitely feel, I could feel the pressure points. I could. I guess my question to you, and I put it in the chat, like, what if you can't bring yourself to say that? Because the thing that mission accomplishment is always first for people like us, and until we accomplish that mission, I don't know about anybody else, but I can't bring myself to say that I accept it because I did not accomplish the mission. It's not done yet. So until I have that, I don't know if I could, like, I almost feel like I'd do my senior drill instructor a disjustice if I were to say those words out loud, because I haven't done it. So if I definitely feel more relaxed, I definitely feel more calm. However, you're dealing with Marines. We're a stubborn breed,
Yeah, oh, I get it.
to say the
So
least. But definitely, I feel more aware. I feel more relaxed.
good.
And you also have to remember, I've got 3 crazies tearing the house up right now, so it's probably interfering with my ability to assess.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah.
So what I would say, so I'm glad that you're noticing that you're experiencing more calm, and I get what you're saying, that, you know, it's part of why I mentioned some people really do feel challenged around saying the words I love and accept myself. And it can be a process, right? Like I would actually even tap on, even though I can't say I accept myself, and you can either decide to add the other bit or not. It's kind of funny and ironic though, but you could even go, even though I can't say I accept myself, I deeply love and accept myself. Or find a word that does work for you.
That's something I might be able to do. That's definitely something a drill instructor would say to you, or a platoon sergeant. So I think I
Yeah.
might be able to say that. Sure. That's
Yeah,
very
so,
clever.
I mean, I know it's kind of a little convoluted, but really, essentially, you can use this for any block that you come up against. And so what you're really vocalizing here is a block, right? That comes from your history, that your history does not have to be your future. Tony, I noticed that you came back on camera. I wondered if that was because you have something that you want to share?
Yes, I turned my camera off because I'm taking massive notes and I didn't want it to be a distraction. But I love the fact that you talked about making these statements out loud to kind of take that power away, because part of the vulnerability of us either sharing our story or sharing our trauma, with other veterans, and if it's one of the first times, or if you don't do it often, it becomes very hard to talk about any of the trauma or what we're feeling, or even if it is, feeling, worthlessness. It was told to me one time that it's kind of like watching a scary movie. That if you watch a movie that's just completely frightening, you tend to stay away from it and you tend to avoid it. But if you watch that movie over and over and over and over again, you start to become numb to it. You start to kind of feel like it's losing its power. It's losing its scariness. You know what I mean? And so the part of the vulnerability of being able to open up, and kind of giving that statement less power and just continuously sharing it, I think is amazing. A lot of what you were doing is just, directly ties in or reminds me of mindfulness. But I love the tapping part, because as you're doing mindfulness, they tell you to, like focus on, how your face feels, how your shoulders feel, how your feet feel, and everything else. But the physical tapping like forces you to say that's there. You know what I mean? Like that feeling is consciously, put there, and you don't have to try to feel your face. You're actually, doing that physical motion of saying, yep, I can feel that for sure. And then to kind of talk about, what Johnny was saying is that, when you're going through this process, and another way that even in mindfulness was told is that, it can kind of feel like that, that voodoo woohoo stuff or whatever. But if you just change the mindset of what it looks like, of saying, am I looking at it from a lens of, I want to be a better performer. I want to put this into a performance elevation kind of mode. Then even if you do it yourself in your own space where nobody else is around, so that they can't hear you say those statements, but you're focused on, I'm doing it so that I can be a better performer. There's many things in our minds, such as the worthiness thing, that many people know we're our own worst enemy. That we are the ones that whatever's in our mind is really kind of stepping in the way. And so if we let that statement set in our minds, then it's going to affect our performance as we go forward. So the more we set back personally within that corner and sort of take that power away from that, then we're actually preparing ourselves to be better performers. Whether we're talking about, the venture space of business that we're in, or athletic performance, or whatever, kind of what we're looking at. So, when somebody said, I took it from an aspect of saying, I want to jump into this because I want to be a high performer. He really took the position of saying that, I'm going to make this happen, and I'm going to put this in a place so that I can't stand in my own way when it comes time for me to be a better performer later on.
I love what you're saying there. And of course, a lot of my focus is about getting people into peak performance states. So I'm right there with you, Tony, on that one. And it's tricky to do that if you're stuck in past trauma. It's very hard to be a high performer if that's where you're stuck. And so I understand exactly what you're saying about, articulating and not wanting to articulate. And I think the distinction here is, there's a difference between talking about what happened, where you get stuck in the story and you're really actually just re-imprinting the problem, as opposed to what we're doing here right now, which is you're re-articulating, but you're doing it in the presence of a tool that is designed to take the stress and break the patterns. And so if any of you are having trouble with articulating, I would offer that that you give yourself permission to articulate these things in the presence of a transformative tool. It's not the same as going into your story and allowing the trauma to be repeated. Remember what I was saying earlier about repetition is what creates patterns. And so people that tell their story over and over again, they tend to struggle a lot more than those who can do their work with a tool like this. And of course, the thing is that there are many, many wonderful tools, and I'm really grateful to have many of them in my tool belt, because it helps me too. It's like the family environment was not a peaceful one. I literally thought that it was normal for adults to yell at each other every day. I thought that was normal. I was 15 years old when I went to my first sleepover and watched two adults coordinate together to create a fun experience for the kids without any discord. And that was a light bulb moment for me when I realized that my home wasn't normal. And so, I've definitely got my own history of trauma. I was assaulted. It's like there's been a lot that has happened to me in my world that I have really been able to move through, and it's freed me up to bring my gifts to the world. And so I definitely encourage you guys to persist with this or any other. It's certainly not the only one, but to persist with anything that can help you, and keep on searching, Johnny. Like, just keep at it. You're doing great. I saw your little pink bouncer in the background there.
She delivered me this, if you guys can.
Oh, wow. Well, she's very creative. I love that.
Yeah, she's a little artist, I guess.
Yeah.
I guess, listening to what you just said there, the tools and what we talked about. I know I keep on talking, but this is a really good point. Maybe we kind of owe it to the guys that didn't get these.
Yeah.
And take care of ourselves, right? Like.
Yeah. And to live your best life.
That's
you're not doing them any favors by, staying stuck in the guilt or the shame.
Right.
Can I say something?
Yes.
I have a lot to say about this. So Tony, thank you so much for coming on. When I met you and I heard your story, I'm like, you have to come to talk to this group. The tool you offer is something that I believe in. I've benefited from it. And And for me, I know most of you on this call, I'm a Vietnamese refugee. I wish you could see yourself through my eyes. And I'm always crying on Sarah's calls. So I wish you could see yourself through my eyes. And like, I only have my life because of men and women like you. And when you signed on that dotted line and offered to sacrifice your life for all of us, like that to me, like you've proved more worthiness than any of the rest of us. So for you not to feel worthy makes me feel so terrible. So that for Tony to be able to come here and offer this tool to help you with that, I think it's just so beautiful. I hope you do use it. What else did I have to say about that? Just the fact that if you could see yourself through my eyes, and not just my eyes, but other people I know who've benefited from your sacrifices, you would not feel this unworthiness. So that's kind of like all I wanted to say, and I hope that helps you feel a little bit more worthy, because it's only in your eyes you see shame and feel unworthy. It's everyone else knows you gave it all.
Thank you, Van. I just love and appreciate all of you. I think that's an excellent note for us to complete on. I did just put the link to the page that has the instructions available for you in the chat one more time. So you can either save the chat or just feel free to click on that link. It'll take you there now and you can download the instruction sheet.
Tony, Maree, this was fantastic. It's so great to have another tool like this. And I think it brings up, I just felt like it really hits a bullseye. Like of, what can we aim for to relieve these stresses, these underlying stresses that happen to so many of us, I think especially because of the job of a first responder and a veteran. So you just really, really appreciate you coming on the calls. I always say how much I love the people in these groups, the veterans and the helpers and the first responders. And so I'm so happy that you could come and help. I thought it was fascinating too, because even personally, I was thinking more about how we were doing this for the group, but my own shame in certain areas that I haven't really thought about. I think that self-awareness started coming up, and it surprised me actually. So I'm encouraged to kind of circle back and keep the tapping going. So it's definitely helpful for anybody who's human, right? That's what I'm hearing. So thank you so much, and we will get this voice and message out to many people. So
Right.
Thank you again.
Yeah, and I would just, just one final thought, particularly with what you were sharing, Johnny. If you cannot articulate, then don't beat yourself up about that, right? Like just tap through that. Eventually, just persisting with calming your nervous system down around that will heal a part that's going on there too. And how that plays out is less important than just allowing yourself to be kind to yourself and use a tool that can support you.
That's great.
Yeah, thank you, Donna. Thank you. It's been amazing. It's really has. Thank you.
I think I have to just say one more thing. I did hear also about the storytelling. I think this is really important, since this platform is about storytelling. What I heard from you is that it's not good to tell your story while you're in the story, while you're in it maybe, but when you have come out the other side, that's when you can empower other people and give them hope. But it's not a good idea to keep telling your story when you're not healed. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, absolutely. Like when you can, and one of the greatest ways to make that shift is to step into service, right? Service is a huge key. For like, if you're telling your story and it's coming from a victim place, or self-pity or anything, like if you've got any of those imprints going on it, then it's not of service to others to tell your story, because then you're just perpetuating the trauma for yourself and others. But if you have reached the point where you have gotten to the other side of that, and you're not bringing the energetic imprint of trauma to it, that is and we all do it to lesser or greater degrees, right? It's not really a matter of achieving a certain level of perfection here. It's a matter of just recognizing whether, and you know, we all do it. Like sometimes I'll look at it in the moment and go, oh, wait a minute, like I'm sharing a story that I haven't really fully processed yet. This is not the time for me to be sharing this with someone, right?
Intuitively, I think most of us know that, but just to hear you articulate that so well, thank you. I think that's really important. So yeah, that's a great note to end on. Again, Toni Maree, thank you so much for coming on and sharing such great information and great tools. And thank you all too for coming on. Have lots of love for you all. Thank you. Take care.